I'm sorry, did I just jump in on an exec session? I apologize, I didn't hear.
No, not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Crosby.
And you would certainly be an appropriate person to be on the executive session.
It's out.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's just under the table outside.
That's just a possibility. No, nothing major. Okay. Minutes, right.
Hello, this is Brian Schuster from National Grid, just doing a mic check and a video check. Make sure you can see me.
That's it, Brian.
Excellent. Hello.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October 26th Town Council meeting. We will begin with a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
And justice for all.
Thank you all. Okay, we will begin with our roll call.
Ms. Jukusa?
Here.
Ms. Abbott?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Capson?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Reinhardt?
Here. Okay, so just a little housekeeping before we get started. Again, welcome everyone who's attending virtually. For those of you that are online through the Zoom process, you can indicate there's a little hand at the bottom to raise your hand. If you're calling in on a phone, it's *6 will mute and unmute your phone, and *9 will allow us to indicate that you have your hand up for a question. When called upon, please state your name and address for our secretary, for our clerk. And with that, we will get going. President's executive session, executive summary. Prior to tonight's meeting, we did have an executive session. potential litigation. No votes were taken during that session. We will be moving on now to our consent agenda. We have bills.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Motion passes 7-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. Yeah, public hearing, liquor license application, Class BV beverage license for 888 Restaurant LLC. That's doing business as Indies, 3351 East Main Road.
Move to approve the public hearing and set the date for November 23rd, or is that too soon?
No, this is the
This
public
is the
hearing.
public hearing.
Oh, this was the public hearing. Sorry, my bad.
That's okay. Do you have any-
Motion to,
Oh, I was just gonna ask if there were any questions, comments. I didn't see any.
motion to approve the liquor license application as presented.
Seconded.
I think we have to close the public hearing first, don't we?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So Kevin has to ask his 3 questions. It's kind of like Seder.
Well, isn't it? I only have one question. I'm assuming this falls outside, and Mr. Crosby might be able to answer this, but I'm assuming this falls outside the 200-foot buffer away from the school.
Yes, it does.
Good point.
We looked into it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0 to close the public hearing. And now on to,
Move to approve the application for a liquor license for 888 Restaurant doing business as Mindy's.
Second.
The Class BV beverage license, my apologies.
Second.
a second. All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye. Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. The motion passes 7-0. Next, we have minutes from our October 13th meeting.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Before you adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. All right, we're gonna reset here. On to our
Have a good
minutes.
time.
On to minutes from our October 13th meeting.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have tax vouchers. It's request approval for tax vouchers 2020 1026-01 to 2020 1026-02.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to our town administrator's report.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. With respect to COVID, I just need to remind everybody that the state is still in phase 3. So it is important for everyone to continue to adhere to the Department of Health COVID guidelines. Please continue also to monitor our COVID webpage, which is amended every Wednesday. Of note, the governor is urging everyone to get tested, especially those who regularly work or congregate in close quarters with others in a business or work environment. More information is on our website, but it is simply a matter of going to portal.ri.gov to schedule an appointment. Portal.ri.gov. Additionally, the governor is asking everyone to cancel Halloween parties and has requested police presence to increase enforcement of Department of Health guidelines. Trick-or-treating is permissible in small groups with face coverings, not the regular traditional mask. You can wear those, but they'll have to wear the cloth mask underneath any costume. And it is encouraged that trick-or-treating be completed before dark. Please go to the town website for information regarding safe Halloween-themed activities and additional guidance, including the Recreation Department's All Treats, No Tricks drive-through event on Friday, October 30th at the Brown House from 4 to 6 p.m. and the Portsmouth Police Department Trick-or-Treat Drive-By event on Halloween Day, October 31st at the Portsmouth Police Station from 12 in the afternoon till 4. With respect to the implementation of our new finance software, the school department has now migrated from our legacy financial system to the new financial software, and they're up and running. On the town side, all modules, with the exception of fixed assets and e-procurement, have been implemented. We will continue to operate in parallel with the legacy software, and we anticipate a full transition to be completed sometime in February. I'd like to announce that Mary Ann Ramo is stepping down as the chair of the Portsmouth Prevention Coalition. In her place, the coalition has elected Jean Collins as their new chair. Jen grew up in Portsmouth and is a Portsmouth parent. She has volunteered for various school groups, and we're excited to start working with her. I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work of Mary Ann and thank her for her selfless service to Portsmouth. Last week, we took delivery of the fire department's new boat. I don't know if we have a picture of that you can throw it on. Fire department personnel who will be testing the boat and are conducting training for the next couple of weeks. And the boat will be placed in full service by the second week of November. Lastly, the town has been awarded a grant of up to $51,000 under the Take It Outside initiative. Eligible expenses may include the cost affiliated with purchasing, obtaining, delivering, installing, or otherwise enabling the use of items and goods and services before December 18th that are necessary to increase the town's outdoor opportunities. This includes help to restaurants and other enterprises and recreational events. As soon as the formal agreement is executed with the Rhode Island Department of Commerce, the town will start accepting proposals from eligible entities. Please contact our Director of Business Development, Rich Talipsky, for further information. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Before we move on, I see that there is a question up. Mike, I mean, really haven't discussed anything, so I just want to.
Wants to talk about the appointments.
Resignations and appointments. Okay. So then,
She wants to comment on that.
okay. All right. So, well, then we'll move on to the resignations and appointments, and then we'll make comments. Okay. On to resignations and appointments for the Housing Authority. There are 3 vacancies, and we have 3 applications.
And we've not had any other ones.
And we've not had any other ones come in. I do know that been informed that this person does have a comment, so let me entertain the comment or question. Hello, is this Bonnie Nordby?
You're muted.
Just gonna need to unmute yourself. Hello, Bonnie, if you could, okay, we got you. Hello? Did they go away?
No, I don't know, you go to analysts, so we can see her, if she has a video on.
Shit, okay.
So I guess not. Okay.
Bonnie? Okay. All right, so. Got the panel.
Ask her to unmute you, yeah.
Bonnie, do you have a question or can you unmute?
They're not there at all.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Oh, no.
sorry.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, there she is.
Okay,
I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this is so important tonight to get Senator Sending on this board. We've had so many problems here and we just really support him being with, in tune with us and to be here with us to help us out. It's been just a big problem. And that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thank you.
Motion to
motion-
approve Mr. Gary Gump, Mr. Jim Seveny, and Ms. Terry Cortravin to the Housing Authority.
Second.
Second.
all those in favor?
Mr. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to old business number 1. Our first item is the National Grid Quinnipiac Island Town Council briefing, and we have with us Mr. Brian Schuster from National Grid. Can you hear us?
Good evening. Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is video.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for giving us the opportunity to discuss not only our operations over at Old Mill Lane, which I know there are a lot of questions regarding that winter operations, but equally our long-term energy solutions study that we recently presented at an open house to the public that is also available via our website. Before we get in, I am joined by my colleague who is our manager for the area, Jock Afonso. Jock, just want to check, make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, Brian. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Okay, great. So as I said, I'm Brian Schuster. I'm the Director of Customer and Community Management for the state of Rhode Island for National Grid. And we are here to walk through a few slides, but I know there are quite a few pending questions that I'm hopefully going to address before we get the opportunity to get into the Q&A section. Whoever's advancing the slides, if you want to move to the next slide, please. So the first section I'm going to talk about is our current plan for the upcoming winter operations over at Old Mill Lane. And if you can please advance to the next slide. So just as a reminder, our operations at Old Mill Lane is currently set up to be a temporary facility to inject what would be converted from liquid natural gas into the pipeline system if it's so deemed necessary. I'm going to talk a little bit about the conditions that we're currently operating in, why we need this site, and a few other slides. But I just want to highlight that this is a temporary facility, and really the timeline that we have set up for the use of the site, I'll cover in the next slide. I will highlight that last year we did the same operation, and there's really no change from last year other than we put in a few additional mitigating sound and lighting factors that I'll also address. But basically, the timeline of the operation is such that we will be essentially setting up the site next month. If you wanted to advance to the next slide, this will help outline the timeline. So essentially, we've already begun some of the site preps, which requires us to put in some ground matting and some additional fencing and the like. We did install a new electrical service this year, and the whole purpose of that is to reduce what we used to have as a generator on site. So that electrical service will eliminate the need for ongoing generation, if you will. We will still have a generator on site for backup purposes. As we enter in through the rest of the month of November, we'll begin to stage our equipment. The equipment will arrive really in the third week of November. We have a contract through Stabilis that delivers the equipment. All of the equipment is delivered, I'll say, void of any fuel. So our storage tanks, our vaporizers, our odorizing equipment and the like is all brought onto site, set up before we inject any LNG into the storage facility, if you will. At the very end of November is when we'll do all of our system testing and essentially make the site operational by December 1st. We do look at the forecast as a big factor in regards to when we think we may begin to use the site or have a need for the site. So we'll be making our first LNG deliveries to the site once we have a forecast for cooler temperatures, which usually by the second week of December, at least based on last year, is when we'd expect to have our first deliveries to bring LNG on site. And then it would be staged and stored there for the remaining of the winter. And as seen on the slide here, we will be demobilizing the site once the winter is completed, which is usually around the April 1st timeframe. So there are a few topics that I'd just like to address that have come up either from our open house or from some of the local residents regarding the operation overall. And the first is the overall on-site noise and lighting. So as I indicated, we already, we're continuously looking at operations to mitigate further noise. But one of the things we did is put in an electrical service. We are also doing some additional testing and some engineering analysis on some of the venting operations that we have to conduct on site. So one of the requirements for us is to do occasional tank venting, if you will, and that's just a normal maintenance item. But we are going through some of the engineering, and I should say that process of venting a vapor from a tank can be pretty loud. So one of the things we're putting in place is to absolutely only do that venting of vapor, during normal weekday hours, during normal business hours, if you will. So not on weekends and the like. It's something you can plan and account for. But we are further looking at an opportunity to do less of that by venting internally into the system. So really, it's called a vapor recovery mechanism that we have to go through a process engineering and approvals to make sure we can conduct that without any harm to the system. So that would further reduce noise on the site. And these are just the types of examples that we're continuously trying to find means to reduce noise. We did put up and will put up, we have temporary fencing that goes around the site. We put up some additional trees and so forth around, shrubs around the site for aesthetics purposes. Of course, some of that takes time to grow in, but as I've indicated, we're always trying to find more means of reducing that kind of impact to the local area. The last thing I'll mention is the lighting. They are pretty bright lights. They need to be bright because of security purposes. We want to make sure we can very visibly see all the equipment 24/7. And we do have security staff on site 24/7, as well as operating personnel on staff on site 24/7. But we are looking at ways that we can put in some shrouds around the lights so that it directs all the light just onto the site and mitigates that, that background or a light noise, if you will, outside of the site. But it's pretty much unavoidable to completely darken the site, if you will, for safety purposes. There've been a lot of questions around, again, the noise and the sound, and we're doing everything again. We'll take further recommendations from our local area residents who we know are very concerned about the noise and lighting. Another common question that comes up very often is in regards to, safety protocols and procedures. And we've worked very closely, not only with Portsmouth, but the other Aquidneck Island communities on making sure that we've connected closely with the fire departments and helped establish appropriate safety protocols and procedures for the community. Now, of course, internally within the site, we have our own safety processes and procedures. We are inspected both and planned and unannounced by our the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers. They are really the position of authority over the site. And again, all of those safety processes and procedures, we work in close conjunction with the fire departments. A couple other things we also do, and as Chief Ford can attest, we are sending some of your fire department personnel to LNG firefighting school just to have that additional training. That's actually being conducted in November, and we're actually looking for a second opportunity for department personnel in December. Just again, to give that additional safety and proactive awareness around the operations of LNG. And the next topic that a lot of folks and residents have concerns around are the trucking itself, getting the trucks in and out of the property. And certainly we understand that. We understand that there are concerns about what could happen if there was an accident and so forth. And all of that LNG trucking, which we get from a third party, National Grid doesn't actually, our distribution company, our gas company doesn't actually deliver the fuel. One of our affiliates is one of the contractors that could be contracted to deliver the fuel, but there are other LNG delivery companies as well. All of those companies have to meet very firm and strict regulations. They have to file hazmat safety permits to be able to travel with RIDOT. There are other regulations that they have to abide by. And if anybody really needs to get the details of all the different regulations and parameters that come from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or the National Fire Protection Administration, we can find that, or we can provide that info, or at least connect you to those companies that can demonstrate all of those requirements that must be met for our delivery. But more importantly, we will also provide all of the details and the routes, which would be the same route we used last year, when deliveries occur and so forth. So both the police and fire departments, both in Portsmouth and Middletown, have that information, so they know when the deliveries are going to be made, and they know the routes that will be used to safely deliver those the product, if you will. So again, I know there's been a lot of questions around that. And we will continue to work closely with the communities to ensure that any of those safety concerns are addressed as appropriate. The other thing I'll just briefly touch on is we've had questions on, there's this question about our petition that we filed recently with the Energy Facilities Siting Board. And as most folks may know, or if you've vested interest in the topic, the Energy Facilities Siting Board is a quasi-judicial tribunal that oversees the construction, the siting, and the alteration of major energy facilities. The typical example is a power plant, and they are a branch, if you will, from the regulatory authority that we do a report to for this sort of operation. And 2 years ago, when we notified the EFSB that we are intending to put Old Mill Lane in operation for a contingency for the entire island in case of a capacity or vulnerability type of issue on the transmission pipeline, we approached them, seeking clarity around their oversight of the operation. And really what we've done and what they did, they gave us a 2-year waiver, and really asked us to come back with a petition of, our position on what set of oversight we felt they should have over this type of operation. So folks have seen that we filed that petition. There is a docket created. And again, this was all at the request of the FSB. And our position is that, temporary operations such as this don't need that extra oversight from EFSB. You know, this is a temporary operation, and we would like to keep it temporary and as short as possible overall. And it takes several months to do a filing for these types of operations, which really we don't believe is in the intent of the EFSB. But at the end of the day, our petition is simply to ascertain and get clarification on oversight from the EFSB regarding temporary LNG operations. We do operate temporarily in other areas. This year, currently in Rhode Island, we don't have necessarily an exact duplicate of this type of temporary operation. We are doing similar types of operations, such as Old Mill Lane, though, in our neighboring affiliate in Massachusetts, both in Cape Cod up in Norwood, Massachusetts. So you know, we are practiced. This is a very routine type of operation for us. It's not necessarily, it's the second year we're doing it in this fashion for Aquidneck Island, but I'll talk about why we have to do that here in a couple other slides. The last topic I want to just touch on at this point, you know, there's a lot of public interest in, you know, why we aren't conducting such an operation via our property that we have leased on the Navy base. So the Navy base lease that we have only allows an operation to be conducted, I'll call it, for peak shaving purposes. And peak shaving purposes are when you know you have a forecasted scenario when you're going to have a high demand day, which in this case for natural gas is when it's really cold, and you're forecasting that there could be an unusually high demand on the system, that you would send in on a planned agenda some additional injection into the system with LNG, if you will. And that the operating agreement with the Navy allows us to do that on occasion. It does not allow us to have unrestricted 24/7, 3.5 to 4 months kind of permanent staging and continual contingency. And that's why we're not set up to do this sort of operation on the Navy base. We did try, and we approached the Navy to try to alter that lease in that operating agreement, but it was denied at the federal level. And the other big challenge for us overall is, you know, the lease that we have on the base does expire in 2026. And the Navy's already given this indication that they do not intend to extend that lease. They have other plans for that leased property, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the additional work we're doing with the Navy in a collaborative fashion for some alternatives, if you will. But the Navy base is ultimately, it's a challenge because of that restriction in operating agreement. And secondly, you know, the injection of natural gas onto the island happens right adjacent to this property at Old Mill Lane. It's our take station, or actually it's Enbridge's take station from which we get our natural gas. And hydraulically, the injection point for us is optimum at this point. It gives us the ability to completely serve the entire island unrestricted from this location. That's why we originally cited this backup contingency, if you will. All right, so let's talk a little bit, move on to the next slide, please. And I'm sure there may be other questions on Operation Old Mill Lane, but I think if I give a little context of really what is our path forward, and that's really what we're looking for, feedback from the community, from different stakeholders and community organizations and so forth. And we do have a website that has our recently published long-term capacity study. And if anybody had joined our open house, we covered the kind of high-level alternatives and options that we're looking for. And I'm going to cover those here shortly in a few slides. But the bottom line is we do not have, you know, a predetermined solution. This is completely up to the voice of the community as far as a path forward. Every solution has its pros and cons. And certainly every solution has its own challenges overall, I'll just say. And you'll see that highlighted as we move through the slides here. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide, please. A few kind of high level, first of all, just kind of declarations, I'll say. You know, we with all of the outline that we have here, we are trying to solve basically two key challenges. Right now, we have a gas capacity constraint meaning we could actually have not enough supply on the coldest day of the year that our system is designed for. So we do these design days where we through a variety of formulas, we predict what could be the maximum capacity. And even on those extremely cold days, currently, we do have a capacity constraint. The other challenge we have is, and obviously a year and a half ago with the gas outage we experienced in Middletown and Newport, if we have any sort of upstream issue or on our transmission system, we are vulnerable. So the vulnerability is aside from the capacity in that we rely on one single pipe to transmit this gas into the island. And if there's any sort of disruption, whatever it may be the cause, we don't have a contingency for that. And this LNG kind of operation at Old Mill Lane currently provides that backup capacity contingency, if you will, both for vulnerability and capacity itself. I'll talk a little bit more about that if I'll move to the next slide, please. This kind of just maps kind of in a pictorial way where we sit. And you can see that sort of dotted yellow line. That's the gas pipeline capacity. That's the transmission capacity that we currently have coming into the island from our transmission energy supplier. And you can see our kind of predicted design day peak usages. So for 2021, you can see our actual peak demand could be above that transmission capacity. Now, I will say that capacity design day is, it's the coldest day possible. It's an average of -3 degrees over a time period. And I'll say that the amount of times that could possibly occur is pretty low. It's actually 1 in like 60 years that could occur, but it's possible. So we certainly want to have coverage and contingency for that. And just an example, again, last winter, a warm winter, we never actually had to inject from our Old Mill Lane site at all during the winter because it just wasn't, we didn't hit any of those temperatures. But you can see on the kind of red or pink kind of line, that's the additional capacity that Old Mill Lane provides us. So you can see we're well above the peak demand that we might see not only now, but in 15 years from now, which is what our study looked at. It looked at the use and the economic development and growth and so forth over the island over the next 15 years. And we're really seeking a solution that provides that long-term enduring coverage, both for capacity and vulnerability overall. If you move to the next slide. So again, this just highlights, why we have portable LNG at Old Mill Lane. We know that, there is some concerns, safety concerns. People don't understand what LNG is and so forth. They don't understand it's not actually, LNG itself is not flammable. LNG itself is not explosive. These are things that, there's the public and they wouldn't be aware of that. But naturally, there are safety concerns about it. But at the end of the day, the operation at Old Mill Lane is providing a huge contingency factor for us for the entire island, for all the 60,000 residents across Aquidneck Island and the 15,000 some gas or natural gas customers that we have. So we are making sure that we have a safe and reliable means of energy being provided for the winter season. And we're also making sure that we're aware of, costs and making sure we're trying to seek an affordable solution overall. Finally, we're also looking at ways that we want to, adhere to our 80 by 50 net zero goals, our energy efficiency goals, our demand response goals, and so forth. We're looking for ways we can decarbonize our overall portfolio of solutions as we move forward as well. And I'll just say this as a capstone, we do not want to have to operate out of Old Mill Lane. We're really trying to get out of Old Mill Lane. And if we can find a path to do that, that's affordable, reliable, and safe, that's the path we're going to pursue with the public support, of course. So if you move to the next slide. This is just highlighting again, we've spent a lot of time looking at options No options were off the table, but I will say at this point, we've narrowed down to 4 primary options. And again, keeping those primary catalysts or the primary objectives of looking at feasibility, implementation, cost, decarbonized options, and so forth. And of course, first and foremost is safety. So if you look at the next slide real quick. So we did this study. Again, our study is fully available for anybody to read on our webpage, which I'll cover at the end of these slides, so folks have a chance to review it if they haven't already. But we did look at these 4 options that you can see highlighted here, and just a couple notes that I'll highlight about these options. First of all of them incorporate energy efficiency and demand response. We will always and continually pursue those opportunities to decarbonize our system and allow folks to save money through energy efficiency. We do have a program right now for demand response, and demand response means asking some of our largest customers who use gas on the coldest days of the year to not use them if they can do them, and we provide incentives to those customers. And that really is only it's small in relation to the overall need, but it's a type of program that we want to continue to grow and pursue. All of our options are safe. There are different factors that require safety parameters and so forth, and absolutely the safety protocols and procedures and the collaboration we have with the communities over those are always integrated into our portfolios for all the solutions. But as you can see here, there's really 4 that we've come to provide as far as what we believe are responsible solutions that really do reflect what we believe is the customer choice for the long-term and enduring energy solution of the island. And this is the choice for the majority. But again, we do not have a specific solution chosen at this point, and that's where we need your help in facilitating feedback on the right path forward. I'm going to go through, there's a slide on each of these, so I'm just going to go to the next slide real quick if you could. The first solution that we're presenting in our study is a completely non-infrastructure solution. This would, really encapsulate the ideals of a decarbonized future, looking at electrification of heat overall, expanding gas demand response programs, and ramping up energy efficiency overall. And so a couple of things, just what does this really mean, electrifying heat? This means, rather than using a natural gas furnace, if you will, you would change out your home heating system and have an air source or a ground source heat pump that would be obviously powered by electricity. Now, in order to gain the amount of savings of energy use you would need to equivalent to it, to such an operation such as Old Mill Lane, you have some really extensive conversions that you'd have to do on the order of, on all the residents across the island, on the order of converting 9,000 customers over to heat pumps. So converting 9,000 customers over to heat pumps is not something that is taken lightly, and it's certainly not something that's going to happen quickly. But if this path were chosen, we would work with state, our regulator, with the state policy authorities, such as the Office of Energy Resources and the like, to create the right policies to put in place, and ultimately work with our regulator to put in the right incentives to help, convert people over to electrified heat, if you will. But based on the magnitude of the heat, we're talking 10 years before you get to the point where we can fully no longer count on something such as Old Mill Lane in operation. And it's also going to be very costly. Even with incentives, having people completely change out their heating system is not something that is going to come cheaply. But that's our first presented option, and one we certainly have a lot of support for with regards to our long-term, energy efficiency and decarbonization goals overall. If you flip to the next slide, the next option is to seek a alternate LNG operation, if you will, and this could come in a variety of forms. We could and we are working with the Navy on a few potential sites on Navy property that we could locate a new LNG operation. And these Navy properties, you know, they're more, I'll call it, secluded from the public, so they're not as, you know, right in the residential area such as Old Mill Lane. Even though, you know, I'm sure will be some concerns from abutting residents to some of these Navy properties, but they are more remote, and they provide us the ability or potential, again, to operate on site or on the Navy property that has, you know, the security measures and all the requirements that Navy requires, but it's not at the Navy base where we currently have our lease. As I indicated earlier, the property that we have, our current lease is targeted for future use by the Navy for other reasons. Another option, other than working on a Navy site, and by the way, at this Navy site, we could do either a temporary operation, which is very similar to Old Mill Lane, or we could put in a portable, or I mean, a permanent type of facility that would put permanent storage on site. The other option that we are considering is a barge offshore, and this is a newer concept, an LNG barge. It would be the first in the U.S. to use for distribution purposes. There are a few cases where LNG barges are used for refueling of ships of the like. Actually, down in one of our experts has actually worked and is familiar with the project that there's currently an LNG barge operation down in Jacksonville, Florida. And they're looking at these kind of operations even out of New York and New Jersey as well. But when we talk about a barge, we're not talking like a big LNG tanker. This is a smaller platform which would come in during the season, the winter season. It would be on the ocean side of the island. It wouldn't be on the bay side. So we're not going under the bridges or anything like that. This would be on the ocean side. And we would have to put in, you know, an underwater pipe out to a platform that this barge would basically park for the winter and inject natural gas as needed. So that's another option on the table and when we're considering. The other thing I'll mention with these new LNG potential opportunities is it also gives us the ability to look at a hydrogen hub concept. And hydrogen is something that, again, is newer in the US. It's actually more popular and used in Europe. But hydrogen can be blended in with natural gas and really supplement the overall need. Up to really 20% of natural gas demand could be supplemented with hydrogen blending. Hydrogen blending would then be, you know, a decarbonized, less impact carbon footprint, as it's basically you're taking water, electrolyzing it, extracting the hydrogen, and injecting it into the system. So that's an interesting opportunity for us to build on potentially one of these new sites or locations on the Navy properties. The third option wouldn't necessarily be a National Grid option. This would be something we would advocate and work with our transmission or natural gas supplier. And that's putting in a new transmission pipeline to the island, basically a second pipe, if you will, which would essentially replicate the current pipe and provide that expanded means of natural gas and its capacity overall. Again, this would not be something, this is not a National Grid project per se, but it's something we'd work closely with Enbridge, our transmission provider, with. And then finally, the last option, what we could do, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on this if you go to the next slide, you know, we could just continue to operate at Old Mill Lane. And again, this is not something that we prefer, to be honest with you, but it is an option that we have to leave on the table because essentially it is a least cost option, which I'll talk about here if we get to the next slide. I'm not sure. There we go. But again, we would continue to look at other alternatives, and really this is just buying time as other opportunities might present themselves. But it is an option we have to consider. It is the responsible option because it is the most affordable option, essentially, as it doesn't require any new infrastructure. It doesn't require any new programs. It doesn't require anybody to be converting their heat source and so forth. So that really is the last option. Although again, as much as we have it as a solution, we are trying to find a means to not have to operate out of Old Mill Lane. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to kind of highlight, you know, all the kind of criteria, and for anybody who's looked at our study or who attended our open house, we did look at a lot of criteria with all of these options for a solution: cost, reliability, community impact, environmental impact, the feasibility of installing it. We looked at how long we'd have to continue to operate at Old Mill Lane. And so one of the clarifications I'll make today is we are intending and will be pursuing, additional winters at Old Mill Lane. No matter what solution we pursue, they're going to take time to build and implement. So there is pretty much with all certainty a need to continue to operate at Old Mill Lane, at least for another 2 or 3 winters. And that's something, that again, that's just because of the timeline to build one of these other solutions overall. And I say at least 2 or 3 winters. Again, if we pursue the non-infrastructure option, where it's going to take 10 to 12 years before we have enough people converted over to electric heat that we can discontinue operation, that's going to be the scenario overall that we will be facing to ensure that we have, again, an ability to safely and reliably serve all the customers across Aquidneck Island. As everybody knows, natural gas and heat overall, it's a vital service for the community. There have been some folks who suggested moratoriums, right? Discontinue the use, don't allow any new construction of natural gas. And that's certainly something the communities can pursue. It's not one we believe is the most responsible for the overall economy of Aquidneck Island. But if that's something that local communities choose to pursue, so be it. But even with a moratorium, we still are at a situation where the vulnerability and the existing capacity is not adequate just on the transmission supply alone. So it doesn't solve the Old Mill Lane problem, I guess you might say, if certain communities were to resurrect or move forward a moratorium on new construction, for example, on natural gas. But we know that's a possibility, and that could come into play. Let me just go to the next slide real quick. This slide we extracted from the study. This is for those of you who attended our open house. We did not show this slide because it gets a little detail and might be a little hard to understand, but I wanted to show it to the town council just so you could give a little more insight on kind of the pros and cons and the weighting factors and so forth. And so what you have here is just a list of Harvey balls. The Harvey balls, the greater they're shaded or the more fuller of the circle, the more favorable they are. And I will say that the favorability is relative to each solution. So for example, the favorability of cost, for example, the cheapest, most favorable option is just continue to operate Old Mill Lane as we continue to escalate demand side management programs such as energy efficiency and demand response. That is the lowest cost option. So that's why it's 3/4 circle. But Old Mill Lane, as you get into community, has only a 1/4 circle filled in. It's the least favorable option from maybe a community perspective overall. So that's how you read these weightings and these factors overall. I am going to have a slide just on cost alone, so I'll get to that in a second. But I do want to make a couple notes here. The reliability factor, or the weighting there, we believe all of these solutions presented are reliable. But for comparison purposes, we put a reliability factor in there because clearly, a pipeline where it's underground, it's not subject to weather and so forth, is going to have, in comparative purposes, a higher reliability weighting than, say, something portable that requires trucking, right? Where you are trucking across roadways and the like. So that's why we have a reliability weighting overall. And community impacts, I'll be honest with you, we do have a feedback form on our website, and we encourage anybody and everybody to put their vote in, if you will, put their feedback on the form, because we're collecting that. We're going to synthesize that. We're going to be showing that and sharing that with our regulator once we present a path forward so that we can demonstrate the voice of the community. But right now it's all over the board. We have folks who are very pro put the pipeline in. We have folks I just want the cheapest option. And then you have, folks who are really concerned about the environment and want to pursue the non-infrastructure option. And then of course you have the residents around Old Mill Lane who say, just do anything, but not Old Mill Lane operation, right? So we understand all that. And we get that there are a lot of concerns, and that no solution is going to be easy for anyone necessarily, that each one has its challenges overall. But at the end of the day, we're here to make sure that we provide energy for the island. We know it's vital. We want to make sure we provide it reliably and safely. And we also want to consider, again, affordability overall. And we're looking to you, the community, to give us feedback of what you want or what you think is going to be the best path forward for the energy solution of the island. Like I said, if you go to the next slide, I did have one slide here on cost, because that typically is one of the most vocal elements that folks share with, what it's going to cost me at the end of the day, what kind of bill impacts is this going to have. These solutions are going to hit our customers, the ratepayers, if you will. So it is going to have an impact. It is going to be spread. If we pursue certain options, it would be spread to all Rhode Island customers. That's, we're under one regulatory authority for all of Rhode Island. So these costs will, be injected into the overall rate base within the state. But if you look at, I just want to highlight, if you look at, kind of just the picture of the cost, the most expensive option is the non-infrastructure option. The least expensive is continuing operation at Old Mill Lane. So as you narrow in here, you look at, well, what's the middle ground? What would be the balance? Well, you see the Navy sites are right in the middle. If we were to look at some sort of operation there, but they're still expensive. I should have mentioned, looking at a new site on Navy property will require us to extend our gas pipeline within, and so that we can reach our high pressure distribution system. So you're putting miles, 2 to 4 miles, a new gas pipeline. That's why this stuff is going to take time to build, and we have to put those assets into the ground before they can be operational, in addition to just doing the siting work alone on a potential Navy property. Actually, the LNG barge, it falls kind of on the lower end of cost overall when you look at the net present value for operating, and which is of interest. But I know there's a lot of folks have concerns about an LNG barge offshore through the winter months. Okay, so I think I have one last slide because I'm sure there'll be many questions that I want to get to. So this is really to cap off, as I highlighted, we have all of this information in detail via our study on our website, ngrid.com/Aquidneck. If you go to that site, you can see the full report, the full study. There is a link to provide your feedback. We want the community's feedback. Please provide it. We'll also, we have on the site currently a full recording of our open house where we talk a lot more detail about the options. We have a lot of the subject matter experts actually providing that detail. And actually, hopefully tomorrow, we'll post all of the questions that were asked during the open house. It took us a little time because we wanted to answer every single question and with thorough detail. So all of those questions will be posted for everybody to review. And like I said, we should have that up either tomorrow or Wednesday on our website for all the questions that were asked during the open house. All right, I know that was a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to share all that. I'm sure there's a host of questions, so I'll reserve that for what you may have for me.
Okay. Before we get started, I just want to ask a couple of quick questions. And Brian, thank you. That was a lot of information. I know you had to summarize. I did listen in on the last go around for the open house. I did listen in on that, so I know you had to consolidate. But again, a lot of information. A couple of things that I just want to kind of clarify. For comments and feedback, you mentioned that National Grid is looking to make a recommendation by the end of the year. So what are you looking at for a cutoff for comments from residents from the communities?
So we're hoping to have most of the comments in by early December. Now, I should highlight, as we start to see more and more feedback come in, we are looking to make a recommendation. We were hoping to make a recommendation by the end of the calendar year. I will say that we may need more time And we may have a recommendation that has actually a hybrid of options overall when it comes to, excuse me a second. Sorry about that. And so as we continue to get feedback from the community and formulate the recommendation, and again, when I say a hybrid, maybe we'll use part of the non-infrastructure scenario, but still need some temporary LNG and that sort of thing. You know, we're gonna keep all options on the table. So there have been, you know, some folks have said, what can you maybe do not, you know, for new installations, can you put, you know, heat electrification on for new installations, but solve your current capacity and vulnerability with an LNG type of operation? And that's possible. But bottom line is, yeah, we're looking for feedback by the beginning of December, ideally.
Right, and then National Grid is making a recommendation on either one of these four options or a hybrid of these options. Who is that recommendation going to? Is that to the facility siting board, or who's that recommendation to?
No, thank you. Good question. That would be to the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, and ultimately the PUC, our regulator. So our regulator oversees all of our both infrastructure and informs non-infrastructure work in general. So the approvals to move forward with these types of options has to go through our regulator overall. So that's who the recommendation is to. And who has oversight, even our operations at Old Mill Lane, the inspections they conduct, they oversee all of those operations, and they have that jurisdiction, have an authority.
Thank you. Before I open it up, do any counselors have any questions?
Yep.
Okay.
I guess it's more, you want our opinion. So comments and opinions, not so much a question, but, you know, I know you guys are weighing all the options and all the pros and cons and costs of.
Ms. Abby, you cut off, like we're not hearing you. You froze.
She froze.
Listen, can you hear me?
Yes. Here.
I'm gonna ask you
There you
to
go.
please repeat.
All right, over. I know there's a table. I have pros and cons.
We're losing you again.
Apparently, we need a better internet supplier too.
Yeah, we definitely need a better. All right, I'm gonna turn off my video and see if you can hear me with my video off. Can you hear me with my video off?
Yeah.
That's better.
Okay, I will try that. So anyway, there's a lot of pros and cons, a lot of different options to weigh. And, I know that you could be going through, your engineers going through the process. I think as an elected official, we would see a hybrid approach personally. I think incentives to get people to convert and a little bit of the non-infrastructure approach woven into whatever solution you end up narrowing in on would be something I would like to see in the best interest of our community. I would be open to entertaining the idea of a moratorium in conjunction with incentives, as in like a 1-for-1 trade-off for new hookups become available when you get people off. I think those are all options that probably should be on the table and considered. And then wherever you end up in that chart, that last chart bar graph that you showed, you know, in the middle options there, I would just like to say that Old Mill Lane is not a long-term facility, and I would not be supportive of having that be your long-term solution. So as we approve it on a, you know, yearly or two years at a time, we would appreciate you coming back and updating the status of your long-term solutions, because you know, it might be responsible to keep it on the table for now and a good temporary solution, but I certainly do not want to see that being our long-term answer to this problem. And since there is a capacity issue, I don't know, incentives in conjunction with a moratorium, in conjunction with a long-term solution, whether it's the pipeline or the LNG barge, it would be nice to have a combination of all of those. So, and thank you for the update.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Mr. President?
we've received many similar type of comments. And of course, the challenge is with a hybrid approach, you still are investing, significant money. And so the affordability question comes into play. So if you look at it, so all of these options alone can provide adequate heating for, the 15 years plus of the study. It gives us so much capacity. So we put an LNG, I hate to say it, you don't need the electrification, even though we want to do that for our decarbonization goals. Absolutely, right? But with an LNG barge or another LNG site on Navy property, you open up the capacity such that those other programs aren't necessary, but maybe we still want to pursue them because it's good for other reasons, right? But whenever you do that, you're adding more and more cost into the equation. So that's the only challenge with the hybrid approach, is you end up spending a lot more money when you don't necessarily have to, just for heating purposes alone. But I get your point, and it makes a lot of sense, because we've heard similar feedback.
Mr. President, I think the audience has tremendous questions, so I will only ask one, and that is, Brian, I know you're saying that the purpose of this is to try to pick one of the 4 options or get feedback about that. But what I'm hearing as a town council person is that my constituents are actually being harmed. And you only talked about that for a little bit, about sights, sounds, smells. If they are being harmed, I think they need to be compensated by NGrid, because they shouldn't be the way that the rest of the folks in Rhode Island are able to get cheaper gas. So what is your mechanism for allowing them to ask for compensation?
Thank you for the question. I will say I'm not sure if I understand the harm. We certainly believe what the operation is safe, and we're not imposing any harm to community. Now, if you're talking about lights being harmful or the noise being harmful, I can understand that I'll call it disappointment in that. We have infrastructure.
Property value devaluation.
So we have our assets run throughout the state. And if we compensated everybody for every transmission tower we put in, every substation, every even LNG operations, the rates for our customers would be ridiculously expensive. So that is not something we do. We don't compensate for operations due to the alleged devaluing of property, if you will, because of our infrastructure. But I am concerned about, folks thinking they're in harm or they're at harm. And I guess, that sounds like they feel there's some sort of imminent danger. And I get like any fuel, any operation has inherent risks, if you will. And that's why we work very closely with both our regulator and the local community and with, the fire departments and so forth, and develop the right safety protocols and procedures. LNG is not, so now I'll voice my opinion, because as far as the danger and the risks, the likelihood of any sort of scenario obviously is extremely rare. We provided these detailed stats and so forth to the fire department officials. So the 1 in 10 million chance that we had some sort of incident, and the incident would be in the form of potentially a leak, if you will, and fumes escaping. And there could be the fire department would be part of the process to recover from that. So you're talking folks would have to potentially evacuate, the neighbors would have to evacuate for a period of time while the fumes or the leak disseminates. That's the kind of risks that we're talking about here. LNG is in itself is non-toxic. It's lighter than air once it becomes vaporized. So So if there were ever a leak of this liquid compacted fuel, it's going to immediately evaporate. But that fume, of course, once it gets a certain concentration of oxygen, it is, flammable. So that's what you got to be careful of. So those are the precautions and the safety protocols and all the different measures that we have. Like you would have with other facilities or establishments that have fuels of some sort. Your propane tank and your gas grill has, if not more risk, that you have to weigh into the equation overall. But that's why we have such strict and strong safety protocols and procedures and operations and qualifications and training and the drills that we do and so forth. I get that there is safety concern. I understand. We all understand that, including ourselves, we don't want to have to operate at Old Mill Lane. But as far as devaluing property and the like, that's not something National Grid entertains. It's just not. We have these types of operations in like infrastructure throughout the state. We're there to provide an essential service, and unfortunately, there's going to be, there are some neighbors that are closer to this specific temporary operation than others.
Interesting answer. Thank you. Thank you. I'll let the other folks ask questions.
I'm not seeing any from the attendees, but there are some questions. And Brian, are you able to see the questions?
Let me see. I think I might.
You've probably addressed two of them, but I don't know. Are you able to see them?
I am. So I just want to read it here real quick.
Sure.
Okay, so one of the questions is around the conversion of customers. The 9,000 customers to limit would be eliminating the both current and projected deficit. So we are pursuing a permanent, long-term, enduring solution. We're not just trying to solve today's challenge, but the challenge for the next 15 years. So that 9,000 customers, which is approximately 65% of our gas customers across the island, we would be looking to convert for load predicted up to 2035, if you will. So it's not just today. I think that was one of the questions.
Okay. I think it was as well.
Yeah. And what about so there was a question on what about a moratorium on new connections and then electrify some current customers? Yeah, that's been suggested previous. That would be, again, more of a hybrid approach, which is certainly possible. But again, that comes with additional challenges in the form of cost, because we'd still be implementing some form of, the moratorium, again, does not cover the challenges that exist today and why we have Old Mill Lane with regard to vulnerability and capacity. That would just impact future growth. Okay, let me make sure. Your report also know that when you account for benefits that the non-infrastructure looks much better than almost all their options, particularly if you don't assume this. So there's somebody, I think they're making a comment that the non-infrastructure solution looks better than all options. Again, we don't have necessarily. If it was an easy answer, we would have already approached our regulator with a solution going forward. But all options have their pros and cons. I will say that there's mention of Massachusetts ratepayers picking up half the pipeline costs. If we were to pursue a new transmission pipeline, which would be again owned and operated by Enbridge, there is a potential benefit for Massachusetts because the pipeline could potentially provide additional benefits to gas capacity constraints on Cape Cod, for example. So there's an opportunity to do some cost sharing with that option. That's already embedded in our overall study, which those of you who read it will find that. There's a question about willing to continuously monitor and record the noise level, allow town official and local residents to review the log. That's certainly something we can entertain as far as recording noise levels. And then we agree, the noise level we want to mitigate overall. And we're looking at every opportunity to do that. We're not sure what kind of monitoring and what sort of devices. We'd have to look into what that entails, but we can certainly entertain looking further into that as far as recording and monitoring noise levels. And then somebody mentions the Rhode Island test. So for those who don't know, the Rhode Island test in simple terms is when you start to blend in societal benefits, if you will, to costs, that changes the equation or the answer, if you will, for overall costs. Our costs that we present in the study are net present value costs just alone for that solution, if you will. But some of the solutions are simply, if we go with a non-infrastructure solution, for example, what is the long-term societal benefits? What are the increased jobs, right? For all the amount of personnel that would be hired to change equipment, right? And so forth, that has a societal benefit. What are the long-term health benefits, right, of a more decarbonized setting? So there are costs, I'll say, or savings, or however you want to categorize it, that are not necessarily related to just like the infrastructure or the physical costs that we would have to endure, that because they're, I guess, subjective sometimes in nature and not yet fully vetted as far as how they would look. We did not build those society costs into our analysis, but that is something we do reference in the study, and certainly something that, if that option is pursued, would get more visibility and have obviously more analysis done on. How frequent on the blowdowns at Old Mill Lane? So the blowdowns, again, we do have to periodically vent the tanks they can over time create vapor pockets in the top of the tanks. So it all depends on the temperatures outside and so forth. And so for regular maintenance purposes, they do conduct planned venting, vapor venting, to remove the vapors from the tanks. It depends. So I can't say for sure. We can certainly follow up with the specific example, but we are, again, targeting to do those only during business hours during the day. They could be done once a day, every other day type of scenario. It does depend on the conditions. We also, we're looking at means to, again, recapture that venting into the system, as I highlighted earlier, and that way you wouldn't have any venting whatsoever happening from the tanks. That would mitigate all that noise. That is the loudest element of our operations at Old Mill Lane, is the venting. It's a large hissing noise as the air vents out of the tanks. Okay. Would you please move? Okay. Yeah, we can move the porta potty. It seems like there's a visibility issue with it doesn't matter. We do have a trailer that we put on site for some of our operational personnel. As again, we have that site manned 24/7, both the security and operation personnel. And looks like there's a concern about where the porta-john was located last year, so we can look at relocating that. Jock, you'll take that for note. So there's a question, why is National Grid using CNG in New York and LNG in Rhode Island? And the simple answer is LNG has a much more effective energy dynamic, if you will. There's more energy within an LNG. It's, you liquefied versus compressed. So the amount versus having multiple CNG sites, which our downstate element down in Long Island has. We have numerous CNG sites across Long Island. We're looking to minimize the impact of our temporary operations on Old Mill Lane. Again, we don't even have to be there if we don't have to. So we have one site, one LNG site provides us that adequate capacity and contingency from vulnerability. Sorry, that's why we're mainly using LNG. You just get more, you get more energy from that source than CNG.
Right.
What is
Yeah.
getting vented from the tanks? Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
There's a last question on what is getting vented from the tanks during blowdowns, and is there environmental climate? It is largely air, but naturally with any venting from the SID, there are some methane particulates. So you do have some elements of gas particulates that is included in venting. Nothing more than you would get from an exhaust vehicle of your vehicle or of that nature. It's concentrated. It happens quickly. But yeah, it's a combination of air and methane.
We do have a question from one of the panelists, Mr. Crosby.
I don't have a question as much as an observation. First of all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would like to say, first of all, that this is really a sterling example of the planning process, presenting a broad sensitivity analysis and getting public impact is, public opinion is crucial to making something like this as broad as this is of a, I like to say a problem requires a solution and a predicament requires it to be addressed. We're not going to solve this problem, but we certainly have to address it, and we have to address it in a large scale way as a community. I think my experience with moratoriums has been that moratoriums have to have a sunset date. You can't just place a moratorium and then walk away from the problem. You have to continue to work on the problem, and the moratorium needs to go away at a certain point. And thirdly, I'd like to talk about the property value argument for a moment. I think that there's a lot of misconception about how property values are affected by this sort of thing. Property values, when an assessor goes out to look at property values, he doesn't walk around and say, oh, this guy has got a junk farm next to his property and therefore his property is devalued. The property, where property values come into place is when there is a transaction that takes place, and that it depends upon what someone is willing to accept as the value of their property when they're trying to sell it. So I think that if you want to try and say that having a temporary LNG facility like this next to my property is going to devalue it, I think that over time you have to understand that there may be 6 or 8 or 10 or a dozen properties in the neighborhood that eventually get sold for less, but it just doesn't. We see this all the time in zoning, where we get complaints about people talking about their property being devalued by this guy next door, having a tree overhanging the property, or he's got a dozen boat trailers in his front yard, but it just doesn't work that way. And so I think that a predicament like this requires us as a community to kind of step up as a whole to try and understand the problem, rather than us trying to appreciate the problem individually. Thank you. That's my 2 cents.
I appreciate your comments, and I would like to thank you for highlighting the approach that we're taking. This is the first time we're taking this sort of community voiced approach for a challenge for all of our operation history in National Grid in Rhode Island. And we want to be very transparent about the challenge that we have. We want to make sure people understand that we are in a situation where we we want to protect folks' vulnerability to a heating issue. And obviously the outage that happened a year and a half ago, very unfortunate. And it took us, we were able to mobilize the Old Mill Lane site after the event, but as a contingency for that scenario, we never want that to happen again. But it's a really complicated a solution path forward. And frankly, again, everything's on the table. It doesn't hurt us, National Grid, at all, one option over the other. It's just, what is the community willing to endure, if you will, regarding, and what is their favored approach? And we want to support that and bring that to our regulator at the end of the day. And it's really the first time that we're using this kind of transparent, hey folks, we want to make sure we provide reliable, safe energy, and we're here to do that for you. Here's the cards on the table. Take your pick, and we'll support it. And we're hoping that we get everybody in, because the opinions are across the board, but we're hoping we're able to come to some sort of consensus of the optimal approach forward. Thank you for those comments.
Mr. President, we have a question or a
Mr.
comment?
President?
Yep.
I do. It seems to me that the only real viable long-term solution for this is a new pipeline to the island. It most likely should be either at the northern end or the western side to create a looped system so that we don't have an outage from one side or the other. Putting on temporary sites, whether it be at the Navy, certainly not at Old Mill anymore, are not long-term viable. If we don't have a loop system providing two directions of gas, eventually we're going to have the same situation. Putting in a moratorium, to me, what might defeat the purpose of the long-term goal of mitigating any issues for climate change, because people may just turn around and say, well, the price of oil today is a lot less expensive than putting in heat pumps. So they may go with oil, which is not as clean as natural gas. So
right,
working on a two-side solution is the best option, where we're working on trying to get people off of fossil fuels, but we may end up hurting ourselves in the long run for a short-term solution. I would like to see us obviously get rid of the Old Mill Lane as quickly as possible. But to me, it seems like the easiest thing and the most beneficial for the long-term use is to loop the system together, coming across the north side, with the pipeline that feeds the natural gas energy plant in Tiverton, and creating a loop throughout the island. Because when we have the dead ends, that's why we end up with half an island shut down.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for that feedback. But there's a question about approval from the state in 2018. So we got the approval from the state. I think that was being referred to as zoning approval for operation. We had maintenance operations during the summer 2018, and the approval from the state comes every year and via our regulator. We provide them notice, and then they begin their planning and inspection process, if you will. So just wanted to clarify, there was approval from the state in 2018. I think they're referring to town zoning approval, as we got a zoning certificate in 2018 from you. There's a question on what percentage of natural gas at Old Mill Lane supports Portsmouth versus the other townships. Jock, do you have the breakdown by each community? I mean, Old Mill Lane supports the entire island. So the percentage of customers is based on the number of customers in each community. Naturally, Newport is the largest. I can tell you that, right? And that's not too hard to figure out. It's got the most businesses and the like. It has the Navy base and so forth. So part of it's on Middletown, I know, but I'd have to get back to you on the exact breakdown of percentage, unless Jock, you happen to have that.
Not handy, Brian, but the numbers increase as you go towards Newport.
Right, as you can tell with the dynamics of the island makeup.
Mr. President, there's a couple questions that a constituent asked me to ask. May I ask those for this person?
Sure.
Okay. First, which regulatory entity determined that operating an LNG from trucks for the entire heating season is temporary?
Which regulatory, the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers.
Okay. And the
That's
second,
and then a branch of that, again, just to highlight my topic about EFSB earlier, the Energy Facilities Siting Board, because they have not yet ruled on how to oversee temporary facilities, just gave a waiver so there could be further assessment done on their additional oversight. So that would be like a second level of oversight, because they're kind of a branch of the actually the chair of the Energy Facilities Siting Board is the chair of the PUC, our regulator. That's how, but you pull in the Office of Energy Resources, and I think the Office of Energy Management as part of the Energy Facilities Siting Board as well. Again, and the EFSB is for the siting, construction, or altercation of permanent major facilities is what it says in its charter, if you will. So the declaratory order that we have with the EFSB is to determine, do they have additional jurisdiction over temporary sites or not?
okay. And the second question this person wants to ask is, could National Grid provide a list of typical LNG safety requirements compared to what exists at the Old Mill temporary site today? Examples such as spill containment area, vapor suppression system, shaker fence for the site security, etc.
So some of that information is what we call critical energy facilities, which is not disclosed to the public for security purposes. So the exact specifics, but certainly we share all of that information to the local officials, the town officials. So I can't tell you, necessarily our security, all of their security measures that we might have on site, monitoring, personnel. I've had people ask me, like, what type of firearms does security personnel carry? We don't share that information publicly, again, because it's a critical energy infrastructure facility. We fall under that national protection, if you will, from public disclosure, obviously purposes that somebody might use that information for nefarious purposes. But certainly spill containment and the like, we do have barriers. We have berms around the tanks that we set up and so forth that certainly the fire department and the local town officials have seen and will see as they tour the sites. So I think there probably are some things that we can provide to the public. So let me take that as a takeaway to see what additional details on all of our safety protocols that we put in place on the site. It's an understandable question. It's just some of it, again, we can't share publicly for security purposes.
I don't believe that they are seeking those kinds of security issue related information, but thank you.
I mean, people might ask, well, what's the position of the tanks? And, what's on the other side of the fence? And we do have vehicle protection barriers, Jersey barriers put in place, but we're not going to tell people where they are. We're not going to tell people how the tanks are set up because somebody may be trying to target that or something, right? Or do some, again, nefarious activity. So we can share some information, I'm sure. It just, I'll have to go back to the LNG and our security team of what we can publicly disclose, if you will. But any of that for any town council members, any town officials, the first responders, we offer site tours. You're welcome. We'll set those up. Those are always open invitations for any, again, public officials that have a need to know, if you will.
Right. No, I went on that tour. Thank you very much. And I guess one other question I have is, so the LNG tanks would be carrying their cargo across on East Main Road. Is that correct?
Jock, do you have the exact path route? Which, by the way, the routes that we would carry and when we would carry them, all of that is shared with the local police and fire departments. So they have the exact specific routes, as all of those routes are filed with the DOT. Actually, they have to have a hazmat safety permit before they can transmit any LNG on any roads in the state. So there's a DOT permit that's required. But yeah, the exact route that's used I apologize. I don't have all the names of the streets on the top of my head. Jacques, you may have it.
I don't have it with me, Brian. The LNG team has it and they will review with fire officials.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm just nervous driving my Honda Civic on East Main Road, so it's just a scary road, whatever the safety requirements are. Thank you.
It looks like there's two last questions. Are you able to see them, Brian?
Yes. Will you do a site tour for neighbors who have questions about the site? You know, that's a really good question. Let me see if we can look at that again. The site is shielded again for security purposes about certain parameters on the site. So I have to check. I'd have to run that by our security team. We do open it obviously for public officials. Legislators have visited the site. Obviously our regulator, they inspect the site, both announced and unannounced. But let me see if we're able to provide site tours for neighbors. We'll have to get back to that. And and I know the specific individual asking, so we'll get back to that family. And we can share that. I'll share that with Rich as well.
And one last question about residents having access to natural gas. Why don't residents in Portsmouth have access to residential natural gas?
Okay, so certainly there are many residents that do. For folks that don't, there's maybe not an understanding that in order to get natural gas on your street, there has to be a main installation on the street. And I think most of you know that main installation has to be permitted, approved for installed, and it also has to be paid for. And in many cases, for a main installation and the service therein, if you're not on a gas main already, that cost as regulated is borne by the cost causer or the party asking for the service. So we can absolutely install a gas service to all residents. It's just whether or not it would be affordable for them. If they're the only resident asking, for example, and they have to put in 2 miles of main, you're talking, $1 million to put that in. And that's something that's, again, goes to the cost causer. So the only other exception is if there's some sort of other restriction that we have, if there's a zoning or a environmental restriction for us to physically install the pipe or get the pipe, if you will, to be accessible. But usually it's mostly folks don't understand that it's just natural gas is not existent on every street. And for us to put a new main into that street, somebody's got to pay for it.
Okay. So I think that kind of concludes some of the questions. I just want to summarize again. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. Jock, thank you for being available. It's important that for any further questions, comments, to get those submitted to National Grid at no later than December 1st or middle of November. What was it?
Yeah, by December 1st, we would appreciate your feedback on a solution because we're really trying to be timely and trying to formulate an approach. If we find inconclusive, a path forward, we likely will extend the open comment period. But yeah, for the next month, we're really looking for your feedback.
And town administrator just pointed out that link is available on our front page of the town website. I see that there are additional questions coming in. Those questions can be forwarded to you, Brian. You see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the property. If one of the trucks or a truck drives on somebody's property, we would absolutely fix if there were any damages due to the truck. So yeah, we will absolutely take that back to our team. If somebody drove over somebody's lawn or something, I guess is that maybe what it might be pertaining to.
And then the one final question here is who do we contact at the PUC about the plan?
I'm trying to think who the best, I mean, there's several contacts. I guess if you go to the Division of Public Utilities and Carries, their website, they would have a public, I'm sure they have a public portal, but I can find out exactly. There's a whole, obviously there's a whole department of personnel that oversee our operations and specifically are aware of this. The lead administrator of the division is Linda George, and she heads the division. Not to say that she'd be the person you contact, but I'd defer you to the Division of Public Utilities and Carries website for the right contact information. They are very familiar with this topic. They have been fully briefed on it, and it's not going to be a surprise to hear about it.
Okay, well, again, thank you. And again, for everybody, there is a link on our website. Please get your questions or comments in before December 1st. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Brian and Jack.
Thank you.
Okay. We are going to move on now. Full business number 2. It's our monthly finance report.
Honorable Council, attached is the budget update for September 2020. This update represents 25% of the current fiscal year. Overall revenues are currently at 27%, lower than last year's 29%. Expenditures are at 22%, lower than last year's 24%. No significant fire or ACH transfer.
Questions, comments? No?
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Brian?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, under old business, we have a request to schedule and advertise for a public hearing for amendments to the zoning ordinance to include solar energy systems regulation. Just to clarify that this is a public hearing that was previously held, the ordinance was previously held. There was a defect in our prior notice, so we will be going through the process again and rescheduling, re-advertising for a public hearing. So anyone wishing to comment on this ordinance would be able to do so at the next public hearing. And November 23rd would be the date of the public hearing.
Motion to schedule a public hearing on the solar ordinance on November 23rd.
Seconded.
If I may, Mr. President.
Was that Ms. Captain?
I just wanted to comment. You had noted that there was pointed out to us a defect in the notice of the meeting. My understanding is that there might have been, there is somebody who has pointed out that they believe that there is a defect in the notice. I'm not sure that there was actually a defect in the notice, but out of an abundance of caution, we are rescheduling the hearing. That's all.
Okay. So we have thank you, Mr. Captain. We have a motion and a second.
We have a citizen who would like to comment.
All right. Sorry about that.
No problem. Just want to make sure you didn't miss it.
I almost. Croston.
Mr. President, David Croston, 118 Sweet Farm Road. Can you hear me?
We got you. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, just from the citizen, from my perspective, I want to thank you guys for leading us through this very strange year. And I know how difficult it is for you to change all your processes. I want to keep to the agenda item, but I'm a little bit confused. If we're reposting the public meeting, could you please address the vote that was taken immediately following the public meeting on May 11th?
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Mr. Croston has sent a correspondence indicating an intent to file legal action against the town, and I don't think it's appropriate to have a debate on those type of issues. The matter on the agenda is a request to advertise, and the motion's been made. I don't think it's it proper to engage in a dialogue with Mr. Croston on the issues pertinent to his legal claim.
Mr. President, I don't want to question what the solicitor is telling you. He's your legal counsel. But wouldn't it make an abundance of sense to not delay further than November 23rd by actually, you made a statement earlier that you did believe the town erred. Mr. Katzman does not believe that fully. But I find it hard to believe under Title 45, Chapter 24, Section 53, where it says, no zoning ordinance shall be adopted, repealed, or amended until after a public hearing. I'm just a little bit confused, and I guess I'm questioning. I'm not, I wrote a letter to the solicitor believing that there was a notice issue. I think you're admitting that there's a notice issue. Why can't we just be upfront about this and reverse the vote and have a public hearing and move forward with the respect of its citizens?
I recommend, this is not an appropriate discussion. Mr. Croston raised an issue on what he claimed was a problem with the notice. The council was addressing it in the most expeditious way possible, and we're moving forward with that. And other than any further discussion relates to Mr. Croston's potential legal claim, and I recommend that we don't engage in any further discussion on this.
I'll stand down.
Yeah, and Mr. Crossan, I understand your question. Unfortunately, I am not going to give you an answer. We are only here tonight to discuss the scheduling advertising for the public hearing.
I respect that, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for public hearing on November 23rd. All those in favor?
Mr. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, let's move on to new business. First item is request approval of proclamation announcing Portsmouth Prevention Coalition's Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd to the 31st, 2020. If you give me one moment, I will read the proclamation. Okay, Town of Portsmouth proclamation recognizing Red Ribbon Week. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse affect individuals, families, and communities across the nation. And whereas it is imperative that visible, unified efforts by community members be launched to prevent drug abuse. And whereas Red Ribbon Week offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles. And whereas Red Ribbon Week will be celebrated in communities across the nation on October 23rd to the 31st. And whereas businesses, government, law enforcement, media, healthcare providers, religious institutions, schools, and other community-based organizations will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing red ribbons and participating in drug prevention activities. And whereas the Portsmouth Prevention Coalition further commits its resources to ensure the success of Red Ribbon Week. Now therefore, I, Kevin M. Aguirre, President of the Portsmouth Town Council, do hereby proclaim October 23rd to the 31st, 2020 as Red Ribbon Week, and encourage you to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Week, but also throughout the year, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free lifestyle. Dated this 26th day, October 2020. So, we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Capson?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan? Dr. Ryan?
Mute. Unmute. Somebody help the man.
Still muted.
You're still muted.
Still muted.
How about a thumbs up?
Smoke. Okay, aye, thank you. Sorry about that. My screen shift, I temporarily lost my unmute button.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. Next, we have request approval of a resolution relating to state assistance during COVID-19 emergency. Mr. Jakuda?
Yes, I don't know if you want me to read the entire resolution. Probably the answer is no. So I will summarize it. It is a resolution that is recommended by the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns. It's been passed by many other municipalities. And basically it points out that there are various pots of money that are coming from the federal government and currently are being held at the state level. And if you scroll down to the therefore clauses, what they're seeking is to have that this council calls on the governor to execute a plan for distributing CRF funds to cities and towns, taking into account expenses incurred and revenues lost by each city and town as a result of the emergency, COVID-19. And also be it further resolved that the town of Portsmouth Council urges the General Assembly to fully fund the state education funding formula at the FY 2021 projected levels, and to support total state aid to local governments at the same aggregate levels as in FY 2020. And so it's just to join with our fellow municipalities to urge that the state release the funds they seem to be holding on to. And also, I believe that the funds that most of the funding is on the school side that we would like to see reimbursed, and they will be meeting tomorrow night to get, I think, a fuller accounting, but it's several hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've had to spend to deal with COVID, primarily for air purification systems, fans, staffing, et cetera. So I would urge my fellow council people to approve this resolution. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And for a quick discussion, it gets even dire than that, because if the governor does not release the money before December 31st, it has to go back to the federal government. So if she doesn't act quickly, nobody's going to get any money and we'll all be out.
Hey, then no more wasting time here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Right here.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item on new business, it's request approval to place a park bench in Mount Hope Park. Mr. Woodhead?
Council President, members of the council, can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, thanks. What you have before you is a request from both Preston Davis and Deborah Doobie to place a memorial bench at Mount Hope Park. There was a couple of steps that they had to go through before it came to you. The first step was to meet with myself to go down there for a location of the bench. And I met with Preston Davis. We went down there. We came up with a location pretty close to what the conceptual plan was a couple years ago. And then the next step was to put a guy on land trust to see if they were okay with that. I contacted Chuck Allard. He had no problems with the placement of the bench as long as we didn't have any problems. And then the next step was for the council approval. So that's what's before you right now. I don't know if Deborah or Preston's online, if they want to talk any further to it. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
May I step in for a moment and add some context, please?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Crosby. Yes.
Mr. Davis came to me several months ago to ask about putting a bench at Mount Hope Park. I told him that the council in the past has established a a memorial bench program specifically for Park Avenue. He wanted to know, and I've had several requests from other people wanting to know if they could put benches in other places on town property. And I have said to them that this is really just a Park Avenue project. If the council wants to, I've told him, I told Mr. Davis at the time that if he wanted me to, I would present to the council some sort of ask the council to establish some sort of policy for benches elsewhere on town property. He was persistent, and so I outlined for him the steps that he would have to take to put a park bench on town property elsewhere besides within the Park Avenue Memorial Project. Number one, I said he would have to pay for the entire bench and the DPW cost of establishing that bench. Number two, in this particular case with the Mount Hope Park, that he would have to get permission from the land trust for establishing installing the bench on the park. And number three, that he would have to get permission from the town council to put the bench on Mount Hope Park. Now this is what's happening tonight. But I would suggest that perhaps the council might think about what we should do about others who are suggesting the placement of benches on town property other than the Park Avenue program that we established many years ago, and perhaps the Mount Hope Park. I have received, and I'm looking for guidance from the council about what I should do about this. I've been sort of implementing an ad hoc policy of saying, no, you can't put a bench on town property unless you get permission for town property. And in this particular case with the Mount Hope Park, we needed to have permission from the land trust as well. So when you say, yes, let's go ahead and do this, I would ask the council to give me some guidance about what we should do about placing benches elsewhere on town property.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. I just have a question just before we get to you. Actually, I mean, Mr. Crosby, you bring up a good point, but I think that would be a topic for another council meeting, a separate agenda for the council to take it up at another meeting. But that is a good point. It is something that we can address, just not tonight. Ms. Abbott?
Thank you. Works for me.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of expand a little bit on what Mr. Crosby is saying. I agree with his sentiment. So first, I like the intention of a memorial bench. I love the concept, but I would prefer to see this process be guided by the town. We're trying to get funding to complete a master plan to look at all our parks and recreational properties and open spaces. Where's the design of the park? How does this fit in with our other properties? Like, is that where we want a memorial bench? I think we should identify, the locations where memorial benches or benches period should be installed, and then open them up to the possibility of being installed as a memorial bench, and not really the other way around. Like, although I love the intention here and I love the idea of memorial benches, we also don't want memorial benches getting haphazardly placed all over the place on town property. So I will second Mrs. Crosby's concern and take it a step further and say that maybe this should wait until we have, a plan and a vision as to where we want all our benches to be. this sketch is great, but where is the design of the park that ALT spent, thousands of dollars on, and is the bench on that plan? I think there's a cart and horse issue here a little bit, and I appreciate the sentiment. I am supportive of the sentiment. I would love to see a memorial bench there somewhere, but I think it's the order of events here is probably a little off.
Okay. Mr. Crosby, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I just wanted to explain to you what the Memorial Bench Program is, and it was established a long time ago. And that is that the town, would pay for half of the bench, and the applicant, the person who would like to have the bench, paid for the other half. We would pay for the half of the bench, purchasing of the bench, and as you know, there are 10 of them along Park Avenue, and that we would, and as a matter of fact, I've just purchased another one, number 11, which has arrived and is going to be installed this week with a plaque, and the applicant pays for the other half. We pay for not only half the bench, but for installation of the bench by DPW and installation of the plaque. The applicant pays for the plaque. Typically, they go to Arnold Art and they get the plaque. So we don't have anything to do with that. In this particular case, Mr. Davis has committed to paying not only for the purchase of the bench, but the purchase of the plaque and the purchase of, and paying for DPW to pour the slab for installing the bench. And so I will continue to, it's been a capital improvement expenditure for a couple of years now for me to purchase 2 benches for our portion of the purchase of 2 benches for the Park Avenue Memorial Project, but to extend it beyond that, and I hope that that will continue. There's plenty of room along Park Avenue for a lot more memorial benches, but for us to be extended beyond that, I would like to have some guidance. I certainly don't want to put a thumb on Mr. Davis's request. He's really jumped through hoops to make this happen. And my intention is is to put him in direct contact with the person or the company that to purchase the bench, so that we have no fiscal responsibility in the chain of purchase to make this happen. But I just know that there are people out there who are going to be approaching me in the next few days or weeks or whatever. Well, what about me? Why can't I put a bench up there at the park above the transfer station? So,
Mr. Crosby, I appreciate, I know we got to address this. We will address it at another council meeting.
Okay.
Because I think we've definitely touched, we're probably beyond where we should be on this agenda item topic.
All right, sorry, I'm being long-winded.
It's okay. But we have a motion in a second, but I do want, I do want to just touch back to Mr. Woodhead. Mr. Woodhead, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you.
Okay. The location of this bench, did you say that the bench is in a location that was approximately where the original designers had depicted a bench at the park?
Yeah, on the original conceptual master plan that we got from the Quinnipiac Island Land Trust, believe it or not, right where the emergency access is, right there for the trucks, for the emergency vehicles, that's where they have the bench right now on their conceptual plan. I just moved it over a little bit further to the south, just so you get better view of the bridge and stuff like that. If you turn the bench more towards the east, you'd be looking at a house. So we kind of like positioned it so you could like see the bridge and see more of the water. I mean, right now, compared to the conceptual plan, there's an access going down to a living shoreline. I mean, I don't know if that's really going to happen because of all the riprap, big rocks right there to go down to a living shoreline. So I thought that was the best location compared to the conceptual plan that they had on file.
Okay, so, I mean, I feel that the location of it is at this point is probably okay, considering where we are with the park, and, you know, we do have some discretion, but, I do think this is a whole other topic for a whole other council meeting. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Jukusa?
I'll say aye, and I agree with Ms. Abbott's plea that we wait for a bigger plan to be instituted, but aye.
Ms. Abbott?
I'm just going to make a comment that because Mr. Woodhead clarified that this is where it was identified on the ALT plan, I'm going to vote aye, but I, refer to my previous comments.
Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Passes 7-0. Thank you all. On to correspondence.
Move to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Future meetings, November 9th at 7 p.m., November 23rd, 7 p.m., December 14th at 7 p.m., and December 28th at 7 p.m. Before we go, I'd also like to wish everyone well next week on the elections. Wish everyone well, and that's all I've got for tonight. Thank you all.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Seconded.
I will second that and wish you all luck, and thank God it's over next Tuesday.
Everyone vote. Every vote matters.
Everyone vote.
Mr. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Katzman?
Make sure you vote, and aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes.
I believe some on this call have already voted, right, Ms. Abbott?
Yes, absolutely. First day,
Hey.
baby.
We have a lot,
Thank you,
we're like
everyone.
up to like 5,000 voters or something like that.
I know. I think Portsmouth is like doing the best out of all the Quinnic Island communities,
Really?
no? Or we were.
Portsmouth cares.
That's right.
All right. Thank you all.